Alright guys, welcome to 7.4. We are talking about more with applying statistics, but this time we're going to step away from calculations and sample sizes and things like that. We're going to talk about how to gather data. Okay, there are specific ways to gather data, and there are ways that are better and there are ways that are not as good depending on what you're trying to do. So, excuse me. We're going to talk about kind of two areas here: sampling methods and how to actually gather the data. Sampling methods is kind of how you group people. Okay, so think of this as like grouping. Oops. You can't write with an eraser, Miss Kate. And then this is actually asking. Okay. And I use asking loosely because you may not actually be physically asking them. There's a very excellently well thought out way to explain all of this in your notes. You're going to notice you have a lot of wording in your notes today. But I'm going to give you kind of a brief overview example of each one. So let's start with sampling methods. You've got cluster, systematic, stratified, and convenience. Cluster, it's just like it sounds. You're clustering people together. So a good example, I want to find out something about high schoolers, so I would take a high school, or I would take the high schools in my district. Like, I would literally ask every single person in my district so that I could make a blanket statement about all high schools. That would be a cluster. So they're already clustered together in these nice little groups for me called high schools. I just find all of the people there and I would ask them. It doesn't have to be that dramatic. You could cluster people. You could say, okay, I'm going to ask everybody at Target at 12 o'clock, every single person there, answer my question. And that will be a cluster too. Okay. You could even do every single person in the class. That would be a cluster. That one does kind of overlap with convenience a little bit, and we'll get into that, but it's a big group of people. They're already like grouped together for me. Okay. Systematic is a little kind of the same with like its wording. Systematic is a system. I would take, so like let's go back to the high school example. I would go to a bunch of different high schools, or say I wanted to make a statement about our district. I would go to all the schools in the district. So I go to every single one. I try to get the whole population, but then I would only ask every such and such person. So let's say I would ask, because there's a lot of schools in our district, each one has a lot of students. Let's say every 50th person that I encountered. Every 50th person on the giant roster list, I would ask them. So cluster, big group. Not necessarily the whole population, but a group of the population. Systematic, every certain number. Okay, now you got to be careful not to combine the two, right? Because if I just take my district, but then I only ask every 50th person in the district, and I try to make statements about every high schooler forever, what I have now is not systematic, but stratified. This is the combination of the two. So if I did want to make a statement about all of the high schoolers in known existence, I would first cluster my district, and then within those, I would ask every 50th person, and I'd have stratified. Okay, so that's kind of the combo of the two. Cluster, I ask everyone in the district. Systematic, I would ask every high schooler existence, every 50th person. Okay, that one's a little hard, I know, but we wouldn't use that for like an entire population. Stratified is the combo of the two. Okay, convenience couples a lot with some of these. Convenience is just as it sounds, it's convenient to you. So think everyone in my first period. That would be a good cluster. Everyone at my school would be a cluster. Every fifth person in my homeroom or my clubs, right? If I wanted to make a statement about clubs, I would say, let me go ask my club. Right? Convenient can be tricky to get accurate data depending on whether you're skewing or not. Like if you ask only your club, are you getting really general information or just something about your club? But it is convenient to you. Okay. Convenience is often the one that people kind of double up, but it is in itself its own sampling method. So those are our ways to kind of group people together to ask them. Not super bad. The actual gathering of the data, you can do it in a bunch of different ways. There's really only three. Placebo goes with experiments. There's observational. For example, I could go to Iceberg and I could just watch how many people order a certain type of shake. I don't have to ask them. I just watch how many people go in. Maybe I do it systematically and I watch every third person and record what they write. Right? But since I'm observing, that's what that would look like. So that's called observational. Surveys are where you get the annoying quizzes on Facebook. or the ads on Facebook, the questionnaires, the samples that someone is physically asking you. They don't have to be actually in person, okay, but they can be. You get those people on the streets, hey, can you take a survey real fast? That's surveying. I know, shocker. Experiments are where you get kind of like a control group or a not control group. This is classic with drug testing, right? New drug testing. You get people who take the drug and people who don't take the drug. And this is where placebo comes in. You may have heard this. A placebo is actually kind of drug. It's a sugar pill. Okay, it's just sugar. It doesn't do anything. But the test groups don't know which one is the sugar pill. So everybody gets a pill, but you don't know if it's a sugar pill. And then you're trying to see if what they're getting is a genuine experience or if they're just kind of making it up subconsciously, right? If you think you're sick, you'll probably pretend to be sick, like subconsciously. It's a thing. And so we get what we call the placebo effect, right? You think you've taken something, so you now feel these feelings because you think they should be there. And that's what happens with experiments. That's why sometimes people don't like to do the experiment way with things that are not as scientific. If you tell someone they're being surveyed, they tend to change their answers, right? If you know someone's watching you on a video, then you tend to kind of change how you're going to act a little bit, right? And so you get the placebo effect. You kind of get that skewing the data. Happens a lot in experiments. But experiment is where you have a control group, somebody who you're not doing something for, and the other one you're actually doing something for. And it doesn't have to be science. It could be like, I go to Iceberg, and the control group is just a normal day at Iceberg, and I just record who comes to Iceberg. Whereas an experiment group, I actually go around and tell everyone, hey, let's go to Iceberg today. Let's go to Iceberg today. Do you want to go to Iceberg? Oh, I'll meet you at Iceberg later. And see how many people come, right? You see, I'm affecting that by telling them to go to Iceberg. So it depends on what I'm trying to gather. And it really does depend on what you're trying to gather with any of these, which one would be best. But those are kind of how they break down. Okay. So that was a lot of information. Let's take a look at a couple situations now. We're going to flip on over to, I think, page, like I said, you have a lot of notes on all this. Page 16. We're going to look first at whether they are survey, observational, or experiment. And then on 17, we'll look at the different types of gatherings. So for A, B, and C, identify whether the method of study is a sample survey, aka survey, experiment, or observational study. A medical team conducts research on the effectiveness of a new ibuprofen pill with a sleeping aid component. The pills were given to two groups, one whose member would consume the actual medication, and another control group that was given low-dose aspirin pill with no sleep element. So, clearly you can see placebo effect, right? You've got the two groups. We've got control versus somebody who's getting the actual medication. Clearly an experiment. Oops. All right. Not too bad there. Number B. A local convenience store chain studies the demographics of its retail customers by monitoring the types of vehicles that have visited its store over a 2-week period. Don't see anything about actually asking them. Don't see anything about a control group. So it looks like we're going with observation. They're observing. They're monitoring. Right? Did I spell experiment right? I did not. Not even close. That's funny. Let's try that again. Sorry, I didn't spell experiment right. Experiment. There we go. All right, last one. A Midwest university is considering adding a new course to its agricultural studies college. Questionnaires are distributed to graduates, exiting students, and farmers throughout the region, asking for suggestions and priority of potential courses. Questionnaires, asking about what you want to see, very much a survey. Or sample survey. You'll often see it use a sample survey. Okay, cool. There's one of each. I hope they're not too ambiguous, right? They're not too confusing. If you think of one, you're like, I'm not sure what that would be, then email me because I'd love to know. The other page here, flipping on over to page 17 now, we see identify the type of sampling used in each of the following situations. Let's recall there are cluster, systematic, stratified, which is both, and then convenience. So, a researcher wants to survey academic performance of high school students in Spain. He can divide the entire population of Spain into different cities. Okay, so he wants to divide them up, but he's going to keep the entire population. That sounds clustery to me. Cluster. We don't know if he's from Spain, so I wouldn't really call that convenient, right? Who knows? We don't know. All right, Jenny is conducting a study in which she is dividing a sample of adults into subgroups by age, like 18 through 29, 30 through 39, 40 through 49, 50 through 59, 60 and above. Okay, so she's taking the entire population and subdividing them. I would say that's probably also cluster. She's taking the entire population and breaking them into groups. She's clustering them. Okay. Kobe is surveying students in his class. He asks every 5th person who walks into the room about how much they like Krispy Kreme. Every 5th person. His class. Ooh, that's actually going to put me on the border of 2. I could definitely see every 5th person being systematic. We don't know if he's trying to make any statements about, like, all high schoolers and Krispy Kreme, so I'm probably not going to go with stratify because I don't see any cluster here. But the other one, convenience. It's his class, right? It could be convenience too. And there is some schools of thought where you can say like convenient systematic, right? Like a convenient systematic for you. But you can also argue that almost anything can be convenient. People tend to go with convenient. But we could just say one or the other. Bobby is curious about how many boys versus girls play sports at Alta. Since he's on a tennis team, he looks at the number of players on the boys and the girls teams and then bases his question on that. Okay. Since he is on a tennis team, also leads me to think convenient. Convenience could be it. He looks at the boys and the girls. So he is taking tennis and trying to relate it to all of Alta. That doesn't sound very systematic to me. Doesn't sound very, like, broken off. So I'm going to go with cluster. He's using the cluster of the tennis team, the cluster of the girls' tennis team, the cluster of the boys and the cluster of the girls to figure out all the boys, girls at Alta. All right, cool. Since we didn't get one in here, let's stratified would be something like... Johnny wants to research about cops' salaries, right? So he visits 12 local precincts. He's trying to do a study on all cop salaries. He visits 12 local precincts. Within those local precincts, he surveys every 3rd person. That would be stratified, okay? Alrighty. That's it for today. It's really not a long chapter or section. You can probably get your homework done really fast, but you do have to be careful about these sampling ones and what you would consider convenience versus systematic. Honestly, in both of these, I'd probably go systematic and cluster, less convenience. But you could also make a convenience argument. So it's a little tricky. Go ahead and start your homework now, and I'll see you in 7.5.